Hello everyone and welcome back to another Movie Nights video, and in these weird times of quarantine, I've decided to start doing a little thing that we're probably going to do once or twice a week where I review classic movies. So welcome to Classic Movie Reviews. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about the 1989 version of Batman. This film is directed by Tim Burton and stars Michael Keaton in the titular role of Batman and Bruce Wayne. It stars Kim Basinger as Vicky Vale, Robert Wuhl as Knox, one of the other reporters, and of course Jack Nicholson as the Joker. There are a lot of things that I really like about this film, and some things that I take some issues with, but for the most part, I do enjoy this film. It's very nostalgic to me. I grew up watching this on VHS with my parents when I was a young boy. Right off the bat with the positives, this film has my favorite portrayal of Gotham than in any Batman medium I've ever seen. I love Tim Burton's Gotham in this movie. It's this very gothic style, almost hellish looking, while having some sort of glitz and glamour by some of the citizens. But for the most part, you look at it, it almost looks like a silent movie set design, and it's very intriguing. And like from the opening shot of Gotham down the street, you're almost kind of encapsulated by the world that it's in. So I really like this film's version of Gotham, both visually and just going into the next positive. You really get the corruption of the police force in this film, and it really sets up the world quite nicely. Right in the beginning of the film, you get, I forget the officer's name, but he's working with Jack Napier, the Jack Nicholson Joker character, and they let you know right off the bat that things are shady. Things are shady in Gotham. Something else that I think is important to point out in terms of positives in this film are just both the well-written characters and the well-acted performances. Michael Keaton does a pretty good job as Bruce Wayne and Batman. I think he's really excellent in the role. Kim Basinger does a good job as Vicky Vale, although Vicky Vale was kind of the screaming damsel character, which, you know, some movies you have to have that character, but it did get quite aggravating, especially when you have an actress, such a great actress like Kim Basinger playing the role. But she was believable in everything that she did, and you felt when she was in danger, and you sort of, you bought the fact that she was this sort of investigative journalist. Knox provided excellent comedic relief. I thought he was really funny throughout the film.
Lieutenant, is there a 6-foot bat in Gotham City? And if so, is he on the police payroll? And if so, what's he pulling down after taxes?
And of course, Jack Nicholson is phenomenal as the Joker. You know, the only really on-screen Joker people had at the time was Cesar Romero's from the Adam West Batman films, and this was a much darker take when compared to that, and it's crazy now. You know, we have, you know, Heath Ledger, Joaquin Phoenix, and even Jared Leto's Jokers, where they're clearly much darker than Jack Nicholson's, but at the time, this was seen as like a really weird and strange maniacal clown killer performance.
I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did.
Where the Joker in the Batman series with Adam West was kind of very just ha 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 hoo 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 laughy, and while people died, it was mostly like people would turn to dust, and then Batman and Robin would get them back somehow, and it, you know, it was cheesy fun. But Jack Nicholson really stepped it up. He does, you know, is kind of like the almost classical comic book Joker villain in this movie. You know, some of the other Jokers have changed as, you know, times have changed, and, you know, we'll get there one day when we get there. But Jack Nicholson's performance, I would say, is probably the strongest in the film. The Commissioner Gordon character, played by, I believe it's Pat Hingle's the actor's name. This version of Gordon was kind of there to just be there. Like, there's not really a relationship set up with Bruce or anything like that. And I mean, that's just going based off of the comic. I know when you make a movie, you don't always have to stick to the source material. And while as a comic book fan it annoyed me, that role for Gordon in this film worked perfectly well in the context of the story they were telling. So it really didn't have any negative effect on the movie. It was just kind of weird to see when you have the Batman films now where Gordon is such an involved character. And speaking to not necessarily following the source material, something that this film did that I actually quite liked was having the Joker be the one who killed Batman's parents. Because leading into the third act, it really sets up this personal vendetta, and I really think it worked for the story that they were telling in this particular film. Oh, and this is pretty random, but I'm a slut for a good bit, and there's an excellent bit in this film where the Joker has poisoned the makeup products in Gotham, and then when you find that out, it cuts to the news station the next day, and all of the news anchors are clearly not wearing makeup, and they have like all these zits and warts on their faces, and for some reason I'd forgotten about that joke until upon recent rewatch, and that just killed me for some reason. I thought that was hysterical. I don't know why, I just thought that was a good bit. As for some of the negatives I have with the film, I think the biggest one is that not all of the film ages exactly well. You know, in the modern age right now, we're in the kind of the golden era of comic book films and comic book action, and the action in this film doesn't really hold up. You know, it's a lot of just like kick, punch, and of course at the time with the Batman costume, Michael Keaton had to turn his whole body in order to, you know, do things that way. And some of that doesn't hold up. I mean, the sequences are still decently well crafted. It's just they're not as exciting. And as a kid, it was exciting, but when you kind of go back and rewatch it, especially compared to some of the great action scenes that we have now, it came across as just kind of silly. Also, this film kind of suffers a little bit of an identity crisis. It doesn't quite know what it wants to be. Part of it wants to be a very, you know, dark Tim Burton story, and part of it wants to be this, you know, over-the-top, goofy, of what seems to be implanted by the studio. I don't know for sure. I don't know what in this movie was Warner Brothers, what was Tim Burton's, but there are definitely some things that, like, I look at it and I'm like, that felt like a studio note. Like Michael Keaton hanging upside down like a bat, that felt very much so like a studio note. Another example is, like I brought up earlier, like Joker poisoning the makeup products, the Prince music. I know Tim Burton has gone on record saying that he didn't like the Prince music being in the film. He was kind of forced to do that, so that was a Warner Brothers play there. So, you know, not all of it tonally really fits and comes together. So that, I say, would also kind of hinder the film a little bit. And another thing, they don't quite reach the character depths that future films have reached, and, you know, inevitably you're going to compare them when you're doing, you know, retroactive reviews of something, and just the character of Batman, while, like, yes, his parents were killed, and you know the whole backstory, it slightly touches upon that, and without really diving deep into the psyche of Batman. And just we've just been fortunate, you know, to have as an audience, to have the Nolan films, and to have, you know, Batman be so repetitive in our culture that's kind of, you know, in our blood. But at the time, I guess it just seemed like enough. And obviously there were a ton of Batman comic books, and I'm sure not a lot of the audience, but, you know, audiences were aware of how Batman came to be. But it'd still be nice to just really get behind the mask, if you will, of the Bruce Wayne character, and to just really get into the more depths of how he feels, which you get a little bit more of in Batman Returns, but I felt it was just lightly touched upon here. Now, Michael Keaton does do a great job of showing the different emotions that Bruce Wayne feels, but I still wish there was a little bit more of, you know, the writing and just the overall storytelling and the complexity of the Batman character. It took a very emotionally complex character and tried to make it two-dimensional, and I don't really think that worked. Batman needs to be a three-dimensional character. Another thing I want to point out about the movie, there are some sequences that are really great sequences just on their own, but they make no sense contextually in the scene that they're in, like this one, for example.
Made mistakes. Then he had us.
It's like that! Now you want to get nuts! Come on! Let's get nuts.
Don't get me wrong. I love Michael Keaton screaming that he wants to get nuts, but it didn't belong anywhere in that scene of what was going on, especially when you watch it in context. It's just like, wait, what the hell happened just now? Another positive that I'll quickly throw in there is that the Batmobile is awesome. And, you know, just anytime you see the Batmobile on screen, it just, you're like, okay, this is a fucking cool car, and Batman is a cool fucking character. And ultimately, while the film pales in comparison to some of the iterations of the character that we have now on screen, it's still just this wonderful, goofy, dark Tim Burton movie that explores the famous pop cultural character of Batman, and it really is a fun, solid time. And I'm in the minority on this, but I actually enjoy Batman Returns slightly more than this film, and I'm going to be reviewing Batman Returns next in terms of the classic movie reviews. But in terms of Batman 1989, I'm going to give it a B. Thank you guys so much for watching. Tune in next week for my review of Batman Returns, and we'll see you next time.